You're my son, Logan. Not some slow kid. And yet, you can't even pass a third-grade math test. Jonathan Whitmore's voice echoed through the high-ceilinged hallway of the Whitmore estate like a verdict. The rain outside tapped against the tall windows, but nothing softened the sting of those words. At the center of it all sat Logan, 8 years old, shoulders hunched, fingers white-knuckled on the edges of a polished mahogany chair. He didn't cry. He hadn't cried in months. Not since his dad started saying things like, "You're embarrassing me," and "You've got everything, so why are you failing?" From the kitchen entrance, Tamara Ellis stood frozen. She hadn't meant to overhear. She was only there to wipe down the dining table. But the hurt in that boy's eyes, it wasn't just academic. It was something deeper. Something she'd seen before in her own reflection, years ago, staring at a cracked mirror in her childhood bedroom on the south side of Atlanta. She was supposed to keep her head down, clean, fold, leave quietly. That was the unspoken job description. But something in her stirred. This wasn't just a boy with math problems. This was a story she knew all too well. A black story about being misjudged, mislabeled, misunderstood. Not because you weren't smart, but because no one ever showed you how to see the world in your own way. Later that evening, after the house fell into silence and Jonathan flew out for a business trip in Chicago, Tamara found Logan in the garage, staring at a jumbled set of old nuts and bolts. She crouched beside him, her voice soft. "Ever try learning math with tools?" He blinked. "Tools? Yeah," she smiled. "Let's build something." And that's how it began. Before we go any further, if you believe in the power of second chances and stories that challenge assumptions, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. This one's more than just about numbers. It's about building bridges where none existed. Because sometimes, the best teachers don't walk in wearing credentials. They walk in with nothing but heart. The mansion was massive, marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and hallways that echoed with silence more than laughter. But tucked behind the garage, past the door that squeaked just enough to make you pause, there was a small tool room. Dusty shelves. Scattered screws. And on the floor, a thin carpet that had seen better decades. That's where Tamara took Logan after dinner the next night. He followed her without asking questions, carrying a small flashlight and the same quiet sadness he wore like a second skin. She had found a set of old mason jars, still half filled with nails and bolts. One by one, they emptied them onto the floor and began to sort. "Math isn't just numbers on paper," Tamara said, laying out groups of screws. "It's about how we see the world. You ever count by tens using washers?" Logan shook his head. "Well," she smiled, "we're about to." He watched, wide-eyed, as she built towers of 10. Then she showed him how multiplication worked, how 3 groups of 4 wasn't just a problem on a worksheet, but 12 tiny metal pieces lined up like soldiers. They laughed when a stack tipped over. They celebrated when he got one right. No pressure. No red pens. Just curiosity and care. Every afternoon after that, when homework ended in frustration and the house grew still, Tamara found Logan waiting. Sometimes in the pantry, sometimes on the back steps. Always ready. Always hopeful. She brought in bottle caps, dominoes, cereal pieces, even old measuring cups from the kitchen. Anything that turned numbers into something he could touch. Something he could feel. And slowly, something started to shift. Logan began to ask questions. Not just math questions, but real ones. "Why does my dad always sound mad?" Or, "Do you think I'm broken?" Tamara never rushed her answers. She gave him time, gave him space, and most importantly, gave him a place where being wrong wasn't the end of the world. Inside that giant mansion, with all its expensive furniture and silent rules, they carved out a quiet corner of freedom. A place where learning didn't feel like failure waiting to happen. A place where a child could breathe. He didn't know it yet, but something powerful was growing there. And Tamara? She was beginning to believe this story might not end the way the world expected. 3 weeks passed, and something remarkable began to unfold. It started with a note in Logan's backpack, scrawled in blue ink from his teacher, Mrs. Langford. Logan's showing improvement in class, participating more. His last quiz? A solid B-. Whatever you're doing at home, it's working. Jonathan barely glanced at the note when he pulled it out between phone calls. His eyes skimmed the message, and he muttered something like, "Finally," before tossing it onto the granite kitchen island. He didn't ask what had changed. He didn't wonder who had helped. For a man who believed in numbers, Jonathan only paid attention when those numbers started going up. But the school noticed. Mrs. Langford called later that week, her voice surprised, even cautious. "Mr. Whitmore, Logan's showing a real shift in confidence. I thought perhaps you'd hired a new tutor." Jonathan frowned. No tutors. Same routine. Maybe the pressure's kicking in. He ended the call with a sense of pride, but confusion lingered under his breath. Tamara heard about it the next day. Logan came running into the pantry during their usual session with a big grin on his face. "My teacher said I did great. She asked what changed, and I said it's because math started making sense." Tamara smiled, pretending to sweep crumbs off a spotless shelf. "Well, you're the one doing the work, baby. I'm just here to cheer you on." But she knew better. This wasn't just about numbers aligning. It was about trust, about connection, about seeing learning not as punishment, but as possibility. The secret lessons continued, now with a rhythm. 10 minutes of screw puzzles, 15 minutes of flashcard games using cereal pieces, and always 5 minutes of talking, about life, about feelings, about how it felt to finally be good at something. Logan's eyes changed. No longer darting away when someone spoke to him. No longer folding into himself at the sight of a worksheet. He walked taller, asked more, smiled wider, and still, no one knew why. Because no one was looking in the right place. Progress was there. It just didn't come from textbooks or tutors. It came from a quiet room behind the garage. From bottle caps and whispered encouragements. From a woman who believed in him before he knew how to believe in himself. It happened on a Thursday afternoon. Tamara and Logan were sitting on the floor of the old tool room. The smell of oil and wood hung in the air. A broken flashlight lay nearby, half dismantled, its batteries now serving as props for a division game. Logan was laughing, the kind that came from deep inside, the kind you only hear when a kid finally feels free. They didn't hear the door open, didn't hear the footsteps cross the garage, but they felt the silence the second it entered the room. Jonathan Whitmore stood in the doorway, briefcase still in hand, phone halfway to his ear, eyes locked on his son, knees dirty, hands full of bolts, counting out loud with Tamara crouched beside him. For a long second, no one spoke. Then Jonathan's voice, sharp and low, cut the air. "What the hell is going on here?" Logan's smile dropped. The flashlight rolled out of his hand. Tamara rose slowly, brushing off her knees, trying to find the right words. "Sir, You're the maid," Jonathan snapped. "Who told you to teach my son?" "I didn't," she tried, steady but soft. "I wasn't trying to." "This is not your place," he barked. "You went behind my back. Used my child to play school." "Dan, stop," Logan said, barely above a whisper, but it was enough to pull every eye his way. Jonathan turned toward him, startled. "She helped me," Logan continued, voice shaking. "You said I was a failure. But she never did." Jonathan stared. "She taught me with candy and screws and stories. And she never got mad when I messed up. I passed because of her." For the first time, Tamara saw something crack in Jonathan's face. Not anger, not pride, just confusion. Like he'd walked into a room he didn't recognize in his own house. Tamara met his gaze. Calm. Grounded. "I didn't plan any of this," she said quietly. "But I saw a child who needed help. And I knew how to help. Because I used to be him." The silence stretched long and wide. Finally, Jonathan turned and walked out. He didn't say another word. But the walls? The walls felt different after that. Like something had shifted. Something that couldn't be undone. The next morning, Tamara found a whiteboard box sitting on the kitchen counter. No note. No explanation. Just a brand new board, unopened, still wrapped in plastic, next to a pack of dry erase markers and a small bag of number magnets. Green, blue, red, and yellow. Jonathan walked in a moment later, coffee in one hand, eyes unreadable. If you're going to keep teaching him, he said, voice flat, at least do it properly. Tamara didn't answer right away. She stood there, hands still damp from the dishes, heart uncertain. Jonathan placed the coffee down, crossed his arms. But there are conditions. She nodded. Of course. You don't overstep. He's still my son. You're not a teacher. You're not in charge of his future. Keep it simple. Math only. No life lessons. No therapy sessions. Understand? Tamara held his gaze. Yes, sir. I understand. Could. He turned and left, already dialing someone on his phone before he reached the hallway. Tamara let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Later that morning, she and Logan set up the whiteboard in the breakfast nook, right under the window where the light streamed in warm and golden. They unpacked the magnets together, arranging them like puzzle pieces. Logan insisted blue should be for subtraction and green for multiplication. Green feels like growing, he explained. Like multiplying. Then green it is, Tamara smiled. Their first official lesson felt different. Not in a bad way, just more careful. Tamara slowed her pace. She structured the games more tightly, inserted small drills between activities. But the warmth stayed. So did the praise. And so did the quiet safety that let Logan get things wrong without fear. You're doing great, she said when he got 5 problems right in a row. I think the board helps, he grinned. It's not the board, she said, tapping his forehead gently. It's the brain behind it. Still, the air in the house felt cooler. Tamara moved with quiet caution, always aware of the invisible line Jonathan had drawn. The warning sat heavy in her chest. You're not a teacher. But when Logan solved a puzzle and looked up, eyes shining, she knew something else. She may not have the title, but what she gave him was real. And sometimes, real mattered more than permission. The breakfast nook became a small sanctuary, but the rest of the house was colder now. Not in temperature, but in tone. It started with Mrs. Hensley, the senior housekeeper. She used to offer Tamara a kind word or a fresh cup of tea on long days. Lately, she barely looked up when they crossed paths in the hallway. Then it was Marcus, the groundskeeper. Usually quick with a joke or a story about his latest landscaping project. Now, he offered curt nods and moved on. Tamara felt it before she heard it. The sideways glances. The sudden silence when she entered a room. The tension that settled in the air like dust no one wanted to claim. One afternoon, she passed by the laundry room and paused at the door, voices drifting just beyond the edge. She's getting too comfortable, Mrs. Hensley whispered. She's been in that nook for hours, Marcus replied. Carter pays her to mop floors, not play schoolteacher. They say the boy's doing better, someone added, but what if she messes up? Tamara didn't move. Didn't breathe. The words stung not because they were cruel, but because they echoed the doubt she worked so hard to quiet. Later that evening, she returned to the breakfast nook. The flashcards were out of order. One of the markers had dried up, and the little box of erasers, the ones Logan used to clean up mistakes, was gone. She found one behind the trash bin, sticky with syrup. Another had been shoved behind the dryer, wet and ruined. She said nothing to Logan. Instead, she cleaned up the mess, bought new erasers herself, and quietly left a note with the household manager. The reply came back sharp. Please refrain from treating the staff's quarters like a classroom. Tamara folded the note and tucked it into her apron. Her hands didn't shake, but her heart did. That night, after Logan had gone to bed, she sat by the window of her small room above the garage, staring into the dark sky. For a moment, she wondered if they were right. Was she forgetting her place? Then she remembered Logan's eyes, bright with understanding. His voice, whispering, "I like math now." She whispered to the night, not for anyone else, just for herself. "I'm not teaching to prove I belong. I'm teaching because he does." And that was enough. For now. It was a quiet Sunday morning when the past came knocking, wearing heels and a designer coat. Tamara heard the sound before she saw her. Sharp clicks on the marble floor, like a countdown. She glanced up from the flashcards spread across the breakfast nook table, Logan still finishing a multiplication game with cereal pieces. Jonathan met her at the door. "Vanessa," he said, his tone flat, guarded. "I want to see my son," the woman said, stepping inside without waiting for permission. Her presence filled the space like perfume, expensive, cold, and impossible to ignore. Tamara stood instinctively, not out of fear, but readiness. Logan looked up, surprised, the smile fading from his face. "Nom?" he asked, unsure. Vanessa crouched down, opening her arms. "Hi, baby. I missed you so much." He didn't move, just looked between her and Tamara. Vanessa's eyes flicked over to Tamara, her smile tightening. "And who's this?" "I'm Miss Tamara," she said simply. "I've been helping Logan with his lessons." "Helping?" Vanessa repeated, standing. "I see." She turned to Jonathan. "So this is your solution? Letting the help play teacher while you travel the country?" "It's working," Jonathan replied. "Logan's improved. His teachers see it. And how long until that falls apart?" Vanessa snapped. "She's not trained. She's not certified. She's not even supposed to be in charge of his education." Logan stood then, voice quiet but firm. "She didn't take charge. I asked her to help." Vanessa blinked. "I was failing," Logan continued, eyes on his mother. "Everyone just got mad at me. But she didn't. She made me feel smart." Tamara didn't speak. She knew this wasn't her moment. It was his. Vanessa stepped back slightly, shaken. "Honey, you don't need to." "I don't want to go with you," Logan said, the words landing like bricks. "I want to stay where learning makes sense." Silence filled the room. Jonathan cleared his throat. "We can talk about this like adults. But not here. Not now." Vanessa didn't argue. She turned and walked out, heels quieter this time. Jonathan followed. Logan slumped into his chair. Tamara sat beside him. "You did good," she said, her voice soft. "You spoke your truth." He nodded slowly. "But will it matter?" She placed a hand on his shoulder. "It always matters." The courtroom wasn't what Tamara expected. It was cleaner, quieter, and colder, like a place built not to hold people, but to contain them. Rows of polished wood benches. A judge's bench raised like a throne. The smell of old carpet and sharpened pencils hung in the air. Logan sat between his parents, small hands folded in his lap, swinging his legs just above the floor. He didn't speak. He didn't fidget. But Tamara could see it in his eyes, the questions, the fear, the hope. She sat alone, near the back, invisible to most, but deeply present. The judge, a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and a steady gaze, called the hearing to order. Camille, seated upright in a navy blazer and pearl earrings, was first to speak. Her lawyer painted a picture of concern, structure, and responsibility. Miss Whitmore seeks joint custody based on the child's academic struggles and the lack of formal intervention until recently. "The key figure in this so-called improvement," he said, motioning vaguely toward Tamara, "is not a licensed educator. She is, by her own admission, household staff." Tamara's stomach tightened, but her face remained calm. Jonathan's lawyer responded. He cited Logan's test scores, letters from his school, and the consultant's recent evaluation. Yes, the attorney admitted, Tamara Ellis is not credentialed. But she is the reason that boy believes in learning again. The judge looked up. Miss Ellis, I'd like to hear from you. Tamara stood slowly, walked to the front, sat at the witness stand. Miss Ellis, the judge began, why did you start teaching this child? Tamara took a breath. Because no one else was showing him how to learn in a way he could understand. You were not asked to. You were not trained to. No, ma'am. I just saw a boy who thought he was broken, and I knew that feeling. I wasn't trying to be anything I'm not. I was just trying to help. The judge leaned forward slightly. Do you believe your involvement changed his future? Tamara nodded. I believe I helped him remember he has one. Silence settled. And when you were told to stop? I kept going, Tamara said, her voice steady. Because the heart doesn't ask for credentials before it chooses to care. The courtroom fell still. The judge didn't smile. But something in her eyes softened. She dismissed the court for recess. And as Tamara stepped down, Logan reached for her hand. You were brave, he whispered. So were you, she replied. And in that moment, they both believed it. The ruling came the next day. The judge denied Camille's request for joint custody, for now. She granted extended visitation rights, but made one thing clear. Logan's progress must continue under formal guidance. Supervision. Documentation. Jonathan understood. He didn't argue. That same evening, Tamara found an envelope waiting on the kitchen counter. No note. Just her name written in clean handwriting. Inside was a flyer for an accelerated teacher certification program through the state university, a printed application, and a prepaid registration code. Later, Jonathan spoke. I'm not asking you to stay a maid. I'm asking you to consider building on what you've already started. If you're willing. Tamara stared at the paperwork. Her fingers brushed the line that read, application deadline, this Friday. She hadn't sat in a classroom in over a decade. She'd walked away from college years ago when bills piled higher than books, when her mother's hospital visits became more frequent, and her own dreams felt like luxuries she couldn't afford. But Logan had changed something. Or maybe, reminded her of something. That night, in her small room above the garage, Tamara sat at her desk. A stack of old notebooks beside her. The whiteboard now leaned against her dresser, smudged with equations and little hearts Logan had drawn in green marker. She stared at the application long into the night. Then, slowly, carefully, she filled it out. Mornings still began with Logan. Their math lessons continued, now more structured, more intentional. Tamara started studying again at night, reading theories on child development, watching lectures online, scribbling notes on sticky pads and grocery receipts. She never told the staff. Never mentioned the program. The paperwork. The hours. The tension in the house remained. Polite nods. Quiet rooms. Whispers behind doors. But she didn't flinch. She had already learned what mattered. One afternoon, after finishing a fraction activity using measuring cups and chocolate chips, Logan looked up. Do you think I could teach someone someday? Like you taught me. Tamara smiled. I think you already are. Because real teaching, real impact, doesn't wait for permission. It doesn't wear name tags or hang degrees on walls. It starts in quiet corners, with scraped knees and broken pencils, and the simple belief that someone is worth the effort. Tamara hadn't earned her credential yet. But she was already everything that mattered. It started with a small flyer taped to the community board at the local library. Free math workshop for kids. Saturdays, 10 a.m. Taught by Tamara Ellis and Logan Whitmore. Come learn with games, stories, and snacks. It wasn't flashy. No bold colors. Just black text on a white sheet with a drawing of a bridge made of numbers across the bottom. Logan's idea. They didn't expect much. But that first Saturday, 12 kids showed up. Some came with parents. Others came alone. A few sat on the floor, unsure. Most didn't say a word at first. They carried backpacks too big for their frames and eyes full of that same nervous doubt Tamara remembered so well. Logan stood proudly at the front, holding a box of flashcards and a measuring tape like it was a microphone. "Welcome to Number Bridge," he said, beaming. "We build learning step by step." Tamara watched him from the side, pride swelling so deeply it almost hurt. The library had offered them a back room, plain walls, folding tables, old linoleum floors. But when the kids arrived, it came alive. They played fraction pizza, with paper plates and colored markers, measured the room in sneakers, counted raisins, skipped numbers, drew graphs on butcher paper. Math became movement, color, rhythm. And they laughed. Some of them, for the first time in weeks. By the end of the session, one little girl tugged on Tamara's sleeve and whispered, "I didn't think I was good at this. But I had fun." Tamara knelt down and replied, "That means you're learning." News spread fast. By the third Saturday, the room was full. Parents stayed. Siblings joined in. A few teachers even stopped by to observe. Jonathan visited once, standing quietly at the back, arms crossed. He didn't say much afterward. But that evening, he handed Tamara a check to help buy more supplies. "You're building something real here," he said. Tamara nodded, her voice steady. "We're building a bridge." And she meant it. Not just between numbers and kids, but between worlds that rarely touched. From private estates to public libraries. From whispered encouragements to community voices. From a maid's quiet lesson to a movement of learning. Because once you show a child they can cross that bridge, you never know how far they'll go. The morning Tamara received her acceptance email, she was folding laundry in the upstairs hallway. Her phone buzzed. She almost ignored it. But something made her check. The subject line read, "Welcome to the California Preliminary Credential Program." She blinked, read it again. Then again. Accepted. Officially enrolled. The same girl who used to hide behind library books because she was too ashamed to raise her hand in school was now one step closer to becoming a credentialed teacher. She didn't cry, not then. But she sat down on the top step of the back staircase, hands shaking slightly, and just breathed. That evening, Logan noticed something different in her eyes. "Did something good happen?" he asked, coloring in his math journal. Tamara nodded. "Something very good." She explained it in simple words. That she was going back to school. That she'd be learning how to become a teacher the right way. That it wasn't about permission anymore, it was about purpose. Logan grinned. "Then you'll be like my real teacher?" Tamara leaned down and whispered, "I've always been your real teacher." Later that week, Logan received a letter too, an official acceptance from West River Academy, a school known for its advanced STEM program and high academic standards. He was 2 grade levels ahead now. He earned it. At the next library workshop, Logan stood in front of a group of kids and held up the letter. "I used to fail all my math tests," he said. "But then someone taught me that failing doesn't mean you're bad at something. It just means you haven't learned it your way yet." The room fell quiet. Tamara watched from the side, heart full. After the workshop, a parent approached her with tears in her eyes. "My son's been afraid of numbers for years," she said. "Today, he asked me if math could be fun." Tamara smiled. "It can be. Especially when someone sees you first. Because rising beyond your labels isn't about changing who you are. It's about remembering who you've always been. And choosing to step into it. Fully, boldly, without apology." That day, Tamara wasn't just a maid. Or a tutor. Or a dreamer. She was a teacher. In every way that mattered. One quiet evening, long after the last workshop had ended and the sun had dipped behind the rooftops of the neighborhood, Tamara sat alone at the kitchen table. The house was silent. Logan had gone to bed, the whiteboard in the breakfast nook still filled with fractions and smiley faces. Jonathan was upstairs, reviewing emails. But Tamara wasn't thinking about tomorrow's lesson. She was thinking about everything that had changed, and everything that hadn't. She opened her old notebook, the one she started when this all began. Pages filled with scribbled math problems, lesson ideas, quotes from online lectures. And in the back, one folded napkin, Logan's first thank you note, written in green crayon, "You're the best teacher in the world." She read it again, slowly, then smiled. Because somewhere along the way, teaching had become more than a duty. It had become a calling, a responsibility, a quiet kind of courage. Not because she had all the answers, but because she never stopped showing up. That was the lesson that stuck. That real impact doesn't come from titles, or salaries, or how many degrees hang on a wall. It comes from patience, from listening, from loving kids exactly as they are while helping them see who they can become. It's the lesson Logan had learned, too. He didn't just learn math. He learned that he wasn't broken, that he wasn't slow, that sometimes the way you learn isn't wrong, it's just different. And different deserves space, too. That night, before heading to bed, Tamara wrote one last note in her journal. Build the bridge first, then walk it with them. Because that's what teaching really is. Not standing above and pointing the way, but walking beside someone who's still figuring out their steps. So if you've ever felt unseen, unheard, or underestimated, this story is for you. And if you know someone who's still sitting in silence, waiting for a bridge to appear, maybe it's your turn to build it. Because the truth is, every one of us has something to teach. You don't need permission to believe in someone. You just have to decide they're worth the effort. And if this story moved you, even just a little, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more, and share it with someone who might need the reminder that the best kind of teaching starts with the heart. And it never ends.